The blood-red sun dipped beneath the horizon as Bo Quincy rode toward his ranch, but there was no peace in the sunset. Not today. In his pocket was a letter, each word a venomous snake coiled to strike. For 3 years he'd raised 8-year-old Charlotte alone. His world shrunk to the size of her smile. Now that world was about to be torn apart. Life in Silverdale, Wyoming, had been hard since Mary passed. That merciless winter of '73 had taken his wife and left a hole in his soul nothing could fill. But this letter, this was worse than a blizzard. This was a war coming to his door. Charlotte sat on the porch steps, trying to braid a piece of rawhide, just like her mother used to. Her golden hair, so much like Mary's, hid her face. But Bo knew. He always knew when she was trying to be brave. "Papa's home," she said, her voice small. He swung down from his horse, thunder, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. "There's my little wildflower." Lines of worry had turned his 34 years into 50. "Did you bring supplies?" Charlotte asked, her eyes searching his. "Flour, sugar, and a letter," he said, his voice flat. Her eyes went wide. "A letter from who?" "From your Aunt Josephine." He held up the crisp envelope, the elegant handwriting a mockery of the poison inside. He'd read it in town, his blood turning to ice. Josephine, Mary's sister from Chicago, wasn't just getting married again. She was coming for Charlotte. The letter said he was an unfit father, a broken man on a failing ranch. It said a girl needed a woman's guidance, and if he didn't hand Charlotte over willingly, she would use her new husband's considerable power to take her by force. He was a simple rancher. What power could a man like that have? Later that night, after a silent supper of beans and cornbread, he told her a softer version of the truth. "Your Aunt Josephine, she wants you to come live with her in Chicago." Charlotte's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you." "I'd never send you away," Bo promised, his voice rough. "This is your home." But as he tucked her into bed, the letter's threat echoed in his mind. By force. He sat on the porch, the Wyoming stars cold and distant. Josephine was wrong. He wasn't a perfect father, but he loved his daughter more than his own life. But how do you fight a rich, powerful man you've never even met? He had to do something. He had to prove he could provide for her, protect her. Morning came with a desperate plan. He wouldn't just hire a tutor. He'd go to the sheriff. He'd show him the letter. There had to be laws to protect a father and his child. "Can I come to town, Papa?" Charlotte asked, her blue eyes pleading. He hesitated. The town was full of rough men, but leaving her alone felt even more dangerous now. What if Josephine's people were already watching? "All right," he relented. "But you stay within eyesight at all times." The ride to Silverdale was tense. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. The dusty main street was bustling, but Bo's eyes scanned the crowd, looking for unfamiliar faces, for men who didn't belong. He tethered Thunder and took Charlotte's hand, his grip tight. First, the sheriff. They hadn't gone 10 feet when the stagecoach thundered into town, kicking up a cloud of dust. A woman's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the noise. "I assure you, sir, my belongings are quite intact." Bo's head snapped toward the sound. A tall woman in a fine emerald dress stood beside the stage, her hands on her hips. She was elegant, refined. She looked like she belonged in Chicago. It had to be her. Josephine. She'd come sooner than he expected. Charlotte tugged on his sleeve. "She's pretty, Papa." Bo didn't answer. He watched as the woman directed men to handle her trunks, her gestures sharp and commanding. An elegant hand with no wedding ring, just like Josephine. He felt a cold rage build in his chest. How dare she come here, acting like she owned the place, ready to tear his family apart? "Not our concern," Bo growled, pulling Charlotte away. "Let's go." But it was his concern. He knew it. The fight had just begun. Bo marched straight to the sheriff's office, his heart pounding a war drum against his ribs. Sheriff Miller was a good man, but a complacent one, more used to settling disputes over stray cattle than dealing with threats from Chicago socialites. He listened patiently, his face clouding over as Bo explained the letter. "That's a nasty piece of business, Bo," Miller said, stroking his thick mustache. "But it's not exactly a crime. It's a family matter. She threatened to take my daughter by force." Bo slammed his hand on the desk, making the inkwell jump. "Her husband's a powerful man, you say?" the sheriff mused. "Probably just trying to scare you. Best thing you can do is show you're a good provider. Maybe talk to the new school teacher about lessons for Charlotte. Show you're serious about her education." It was a hollow comfort. Bo left the office feeling more alone than ever. The law wasn't going to help him. He was on his own. He found Charlotte in the general store, her nose pressed against the glass of the candy counter. He bought her the peppermint sticks he'd promised, the simple act feeling like a defiance against the coming storm. As they stepped back onto the boardwalk, he saw the woman from the stagecoach again. She was talking to Mr. Peterson, the store owner, a polite smile on her face. But Bo saw through it. He saw the cold calculation of a predator. He pulled Charlotte closer, steering her away. He had to find a way to fight back. The widow Jenkins was his only other hope. Maybe she could write a letter on his behalf, attest to his character. But when they got to her small house at the edge of town, disappointment hit him like a physical blow. "My rheumatism's acting up something fierce, Bo," the old woman said, her hands dusted with flour. "I can't make the ride out to your place regular like." Another door slammed shut. Defeated, they headed back to the general store for supplies. While Bo arranged for a feed order, Charlotte wandered toward the fabric bolts. Suddenly, a melodious voice cut through the air. "That blue would suit you beautifully." Bo spun around. The woman. She was standing right behind Charlotte, smiling. Up close, she looked younger, maybe mid-20s, with kind hazel eyes. It was a good act. He'd give her that. "My mama had a dress in that color," Charlotte said, suddenly shy. "I'm Miss Hannah Fairchild," the woman said, extending a hand. "I'm the new school teacher." Bo's blood ran cold. A school teacher. Was this part of Josephine's plan? A way to get close to Charlotte, to poison her mind against him? Charlotte, of course, was ecstatic. A real school. Bo strode over, his expression a mask of stone. "Bo Quincy," he said, just touching the brim of his hat. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a handshake. "Your daughter has been telling me about her love of learning," Hannah said, her gaze steady. "We live a fair piece out of town," he said, his tone clipped. "The council mentioned arranging boarding for those too far to travel daily," she replied smoothly. The words hit him like a punch. Boarding. In town. Away from him. It was happening already. They were trying to take her away, piece by piece. He grabbed Charlotte's hand. Time we were heading back. As they rode home, Charlotte's excited chatter about Miss Fairchild was like nails on a chalkboard. Bo didn't hear a word. He just heard the gears of Josephine's trap grinding, closing in around him and his little girl. He was a rancher. He knew how to hunt. And right now, he felt like the prey. The next few weeks were a quiet, nerve-wracking hell. Every time they went to town, Hannah Fairchild was there. At the church social, in the general store. It was too much to be a coincidence. She was watching them. She always made a point to talk to Charlotte, asking about her favorite books, her dreams. Charlotte, starved for a woman's attention, soaked it up like a dry sponge. Bo watched from a distance, his heart a knot of suspicion and fear. He couldn't deny the woman was charming. He couldn't deny the way his own eyes were drawn to the crinkles that formed by her eyes when she laughed. And that made him hate her even more. He was letting his guard down, and that's when they would strike. One Saturday in late July it happened. The day was hot and still. Bo was loading lumber onto their wagon, the back of his neck prickling with the feeling of being watched. Charlotte, bored, had wandered over to the creek that ran behind the general store. She was watching a family of ducks, her back to the path. Bo glanced up from his work just in time to see it. A shadow, a figure, moving quickly behind the willows. Before he could shout, the figure lunged. A hand shot out, shoving Charlotte hard between the shoulder blades. She tumbled into the water with a startled cry. The creek wasn't deep, but recent rains had made it swift. Panic seized her, and the current began to pull her away, her small arms flailing. Terror, pure and absolute, ripped through Bo. He sprinted along the bank, his boots slipping in the mud. He saw the figure disappearing into the trees, a man's broad shoulders, a dark hat. They had tried to kill her. Or worse, make it look like an accident, to prove he couldn't protect her. But someone else was faster. Hannah Fairchild, who'd been kneeling by the creek's edge just moments before, didn't hesitate. She plunged into the water, her fine dress billowing around her. She fought the current, reached Charlotte, and dragged her toward the bank. Bo's strong hands pulled them both onto the grass. Charlotte was coughing, sputtering, more scared than hurt. Hannah sat shivering, her dress ruined, her hair coming loose. "Are you all right?" Bo demanded, checking Charlotte from head to toe, his hands trembling. Charlotte nodded, then looked at Hannah. "You saved me." "Anyone would have done the same," Hannah said, her teeth chattering. "But you're the one who did," Bo said quietly. He looked from her to the empty space between the willows. His mind was reeling. If she had just saved his daughter, then she wasn't part of the plot. Was she? Or was this an even more elaborate game? A way to earn his trust before the final blow? He didn't know what to believe. But as he wrapped a rough woolen blanket around Hannah's shivering shoulders, a new, terrifying thought took root. What if Hannah Fairchild wasn't the enemy? What if she was another target? Bo drove them to the hotel in a fog of confusion. He settled Charlotte in the lobby while the proprietor's wife, Mrs. Sullivan, took Hannah upstairs to get into dry clothes. His mind raced. He'd seen a man push her. He was sure of it. But who would do such a thing? When Hannah came back downstairs, wearing a simple borrowed dress, her damp hair braided, she looked less like a city schemer and more like a frightened young woman. "You didn't have to wait," she said, her smile wavering. "Least we could do," Bo replied gruffly. Charlotte pressed the crude leather bracelet she'd made into Hannah's hand. "It's beautiful," Hannah said, her voice thick with emotion. Just then, Reverend Wilson bustled in. "Miss Fairchild, the school roof is leaking something awful after the storm last night." Without thinking, Bo spoke up. "I'll help. Got a wagon full of lumber." He told himself it was payment for saving Charlotte. But as he spent the afternoon on that roof, hammering shingles alongside other men from town, he watched her. He watched her sorting books with Charlotte, her movements gentle, her laughter genuine. His suspicion began to curdle into a different, more complicated feeling. By the time the roof was patched, it was too late to head home. Bo got them a room at the hotel, and they found themselves sharing a table with Hannah in the dining room. "What brought you to Wyoming, Miss Fairchild?" Bo asked, trying to sound casual. Her expression grew guarded. "My father passed away last year. I saw the advertisement for this position. It seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start." "You left everything familiar behind," Bo observed. "That takes courage," she replied with a tight smile. "Or desperation." The word hung in the air. Desperation. Why would a woman like her be desperate? Later that night, with Charlotte asleep in the narrow bed, Bo sat by the window, watching the moon. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Hannah had saved his daughter, but she was also hiding something. He reached into his pocket, and his fingers brushed against a small, folded piece of paper. He'd found it on the creek bank, half buried in the mud where Hannah had fallen. He'd tucked it away without thinking. He unfolded it under the moonlight. The handwriting was elegant, frantic. It wasn't a full letter, just a torn fragment. A terrible mistake. Arthur knows everything. I have to disappear before he... The note ended there, torn raggedly. Arthur. A man's name. A terrible mistake. Disappear. The chill that ran down Bo's spine had nothing to do with the night air. Hannah Fairchild wasn't just running away from something. She was hiding. And she had brought her trouble right to his doorstep. Bo didn't sleep. The words from the note burned in his mind. I have to disappear. Who was Arthur? What was the terrible mistake? The questions circled like vultures. Every instinct told him this woman was tangled up in something dangerous, something that had followed her to Silverdale and put his daughter in its path. The next morning he was quiet, watchful. He accepted Hannah's offer to have Charlotte visit the schoolhouse, needing to keep both of them in his sight. He found excuses to linger, fixing a loose hinge, mounting shelves. He watched her, searching for any crack in her cheerful facade. He found none. She was either an innocent victim or the best liar he had ever met. The heat of August arrived, baking the land and fraying nerves. Bo worked his ranch into exhaustion, hoping the sweat and toil would drive out the fear. It didn't. One blistering afternoon, he saw a rider on the horizon. It was Hannah, her horse moving at a steady trot. She claimed she was delivering school notices, but Bo knew it was a lie. She was here for a reason. I was hoping to speak with you, she said, her gaze direct. She brought up the issue of Charlotte boarding in town for the school week. It was the same argument from the letter. Get Charlotte away from him. Isolate her. Sacrifices, Bo echoed, his voice raw. I've sacrificed plenty, Miss Fairchild. Now you're asking me to give up my daughter? What does Charlotte want? She asked softly. The question disarmed him. He hadn't asked. He'd been too busy fighting shadows. He looked at Hannah, standing so close in the oppressive heat, and for a wild second he saw not a threat, but a woman, tired and alone. He saw the faint lavender scent that clung to her despite the dust, and it reminded him of Mary. The thought was a betrayal, and he hated himself for it. He told her about Mary, about the blizzard that took her. He didn't know why, maybe to see her reaction. Her sympathy seemed genuine, her hand moving to his on the porch rail. For the first time she called him Bo. The simple intimacy of it cracked the wall around his heart. He realized with a jolt that he wanted to trust her, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. That evening, he talked to Charlotte about boarding in town. To his surprise, she was brave about it. If Miss Fairchild checks on me, she said, I think I could do it. She was making it easy for them. Too easy. Saturday arrived with a crack of thunder. A late summer storm was rolling in, dark and violent. They rode to town under a leaden sky, getting soaked in the process. He sent Charlotte to the schoolhouse to talk to Hannah while he gathered supplies, his gut twisting with a sense of impending doom. The storm was a bad one. The weatherman at the telegraph office said the roads would wash out. They were trapped. He slogged through the mud to the schoolhouse. The windows glowed with warm lamplight. Inside, Hannah and Charlotte were sorting pencils, a picture of cozy domesticity. It was a lie. The whole thing felt like a stage play, and he didn't know his part. We'll have to stay in town, he said, the words tasting like ash. The hotel will be full, Hannah said. Then she made the offer he knew was coming. "I have a spare room in my cottage. You and Charlotte are welcome to stay." It was the perfect trap, and he had no choice but to walk right into it. The dash through the downpour to Hannah's cottage felt like a flight from unseen enemies. The cottage itself was snug and warm, smelling of fresh bread. It was a perfect illusion of home, of safety. Bo stood awkwardly in the doorway, dripping on her clean floor. This was it. He was in her territory now, surrounded. As she and Charlotte prepared supper, he built up the fire, his mind racing. He had to know the truth. After Charlotte, exhausted, was put to bed, he found himself alone with Hannah in the small sitting room. The storm howled outside, cutting them off from the world. The room felt small, intimate, charged with unspoken questions. "May I ask you something, Mr. Quincy?" she began. "Bo," he corrected, his voice tight. "Seems only fair." "Bo, then, why did you react so strongly to the suggestion that Charlotte board in town?" He looked her straight in the eye. "I think you know why. It's the same reason someone pushed her into the creek. It's the same reason you're here, isn't it?" Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" He pulled the torn note from his pocket and threw it on the table between them. "A terrible mistake. Arthur knows everything. I have to disappear. Ring any bells, Miss Fairchild?" Her composure finally shattered. Tears welled in her eyes, and a sob escaped her lips. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then make me understand," he demanded, his voice rising with the wind. "Who is Arthur? And why did he send someone to kill my daughter?" Hannah flinched, her eyes wide with terror. "Kill her? No! It wasn't meant to be like that. It was a warning." She took a shaky breath, the story spilling out of her in a torrent. "My name is Hannah Fairchild, and I am a schoolteacher, but that's not the whole truth. Back in Boston, I taught the children of the city's most powerful men. One of them was a railroad baron named Arthur Vance." She paused, her hands twisting in her lap. "He was charming, wealthy, respected, and corrupt. He was using his railroad to smuggle weapons, to cheat landowners. I found proof, ledgers, letters. I was going to expose him." Bo stared at her, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "Before I could," she continued, her voice trembling, "he found out. He cornered me in his study. He told me if I ever spoke a word of what I knew, he would ruin me. He would destroy everyone I loved. He said he had friends everywhere, that there was nowhere I could run where he wouldn't find me. So I ran here, to the most remote place I could find." A terrible realization dawned on Bo. "Josephine," he breathed. "My sister-in-law in Chicago. Her letter. Her new husband is a powerful man." Hannah looked up, her face a mask of horror. "What's his name, Bo?" She didn't say, just that he was very wealthy. "It's him," she whispered. "It has to be. Arthur Vance. He married your wife's sister. He's using her, using Charlotte, to get to me. The letter, the man at the creek. It's all been a message. Give them Charlotte, and they'll lure me out into the open." The world tilted on its axis. The threat wasn't about custody. It was about silencing a witness. And his daughter, his beautiful, innocent Charlotte, was the bait in a deadly trap set by a monster. And they were locked in a tiny cottage, in the middle of a raging storm, completely alone. The truth crashed down on Bo with the force of the thunder outside. He wasn't paranoid. He was a fool for not seeing it sooner. Josephine hadn't suddenly developed a maternal instinct. She was a pawn, or worse, a willing partner in a scheme that put a target on his daughter's back. "Vance's man at the creek," Bo said, his voice low and dangerous. "He was sending a message, that he could get to Charlotte any time he wanted." Hannah nodded, wiping tears from her face with a shaking hand. "He wants me to feel responsible. He wants me to turn myself over to him to protect her. The air in the small cottage crackled. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging inside Bo. For weeks, he had seen this woman as the enemy. Now, he saw her as the only ally he had. "They think we're trapped in here," Bo said, his mind shifting from defense to attack. "They'll use the storm as cover. They'll be coming." "What can we do?" Hannah whispered. "We can't fight them." "I'm a rancher, not a soldier," Bo said, rising from his chair and pacing the small room. "But I know how to protect my own. We need to know who in this town is working for him." He thought back. Who knew they were here? Who had seen them? Mr. Peterson at the general store, the sheriff, Mrs. Jenkins, Reverend Wilson. The list was short, but any one of them could have been bought. "The telegraph office," Bo said suddenly. "Donovan, the rancher who warned me about the storm, he said the weatherman predicted it. Vance's man would need to communicate with him. Who runs the telegraph?" "Mr. Henderson," Hannah supplied. "A quiet man. Barely speaks." "Someone had to send the message that you were in Silverdale. Someone had to tell them we were here tonight," Bo reasoned. "Peterson, the store owner. You were talking to him when you first arrived. He sees everyone who comes and goes." It was a long shot, but it was all they had. The wind rattled the windows, a constant reminder of their isolation. Suddenly, a crash of thunder, closer this time, was followed by a splintering sound from the back of the cottage. Bo grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace. "Stay here with Charlotte," he ordered, his voice barely a whisper. He crept toward the kitchen. The back door, which he had barred, was shuddering. A heavy boot kicked it again, and the wood splintered. They were here. Hannah didn't listen. She appeared at his side, holding the heaviest cast-iron skillet from her stove. Her eyes were wide with fear, but her jaw was set. The door burst inward, and two figures filled the frame, rain and wind whipping in behind them. They were big men, dressed in dark oilskins, their faces hidden by the brims of their hats. "The girl first," one of them rasped. "Vance wants the witness alive." Bo didn't wait. He lunged, swinging the poker like a club, aiming for the first man's knees. The man roared in pain and surprise, stumbling backward. The second man drew a pistol, but Hannah was already moving. She brought the heavy skillet down on his wrist with all her strength. There was a sickening crack, and the gun clattered to the floor. The man howled, cradling his broken arm. Bo pressed his advantage, driving the first man back out into the storm. They grappled in the mud and the driving rain, slipping and sliding. The man was stronger, but Bo was fighting for his daughter. He was fighting with the desperation of a cornered animal. He managed to get his hands on a piece of firewood from the stack by the door. He brought it down hard on the man's head. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Bo staggered back inside, soaked and bleeding from a cut on his cheek, to see Hannah standing over the second man, the skillet raised again, ready to strike. The man was on his knees, whimpering. From the sitting room, a small voice called out, "Papa!" "Charlotte!" She was awake. Bo scooped up the fallen pistol. "Get back in there and lock the door," he hissed at Hannah. "Don't come out, no matter what you hear." He dragged the groaning man into the sitting room, away from the kitchen where the other thug lay in the mud. He tied the man to a chair with rope he found in a supply box. "Who else is there?" Bo demanded, pressing the cold barrel of the pistol to the man's temple. The man spat blood on the floor. "Go to hell." "I'm already there," Bo snarled. "But I'm taking you with me. Who in this town is working for Vance?" The man's eyes flickered with fear. "Peterson," he finally choked out. "The store owner. He's the one who telegraphed Vance when she arrived. He was supposed to let us know when you were isolated." Just as Bo suspected. The friendly shopkeeper with the easy smile. A new sound reached them over the storm. Hoofbeats, More than one horse moving fast. Were more of Vance's men coming, or was it help? Bo peeked through the curtain. A lantern was cutting through the rain. It was Sheriff Miller, with a posse of 4 other men from town. Someone must have heard the commotion. But as they got closer, Bo saw something that made his blood run cold. Riding at the front, next to the sheriff, was a man in a fine city coat. A man whose face was set in a cruel, determined line. And tied to the back of his horse, struggling against her bonds, was Charlotte. Panic, cold and absolute, seized Bo. He had been so focused on the immediate threat, he had left his daughter vulnerable. Peterson must have sent a second message. While these 2 thugs attacked the cottage, another had gone for the prize. "It's over, Quincy," the man in the fine coat yelled, his voice cutting through the storm. "Send out the woman, or the girl pays the price." It wasn't Vance himself. It was his lead man, his enforcer. Hannah rushed into the room, her face white. She'd seen them through the other window. "It's my fault," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I have to go out there." "No," Bo said, his voice deadly calm. He looked at the thug tied to the chair. An idea, a desperate, terrible idea, forming in his mind. "You're not going anywhere." He turned to Hannah. "Keep the lamp low, and bar the front door. We're not giving up." "But Charlotte," she cried. "They think they have all the cards," Bo said, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "They're wrong." He dragged the bound thug toward the shattered back door, out of sight of the men in the front. He pressed the gun to the man's head. "You're going to start screaming," Bo told him. "You're going to scream like I'm killing you slow. And if you don't make it convincing, I will." The man's eyes widened in terror, and then he began to scream. The screams tore through the night, a ghastly sound that mingled with the howl of the wind. Out front, the enforcer and the sheriff's posse hesitated. They couldn't see what was happening. They just heard the sounds of a man dying in agony. "What's going on in there, Quincy?" the enforcer yelled, his voice edged with uncertainty. Bo didn't answer. He just let the thug keep screaming. He was creating chaos, confusion. He needed a diversion. "Sheriff," Bo yelled out the front window, "Vance's man is lying to you. He's a killer. He's the one who pushed my daughter in the creek. He has men in town who attacked us tonight." Sheriff Miller looked from the enforcer to the dark cottage. Doubt was creeping into his eyes. The local men in the posse were shifting uncomfortably in their saddles. They knew Bo Quincy. They knew him as an honest, hard-working man. "He's bluffing," the enforcer shouted, but his confidence was shaken. He tightened his grip on the rope holding Charlotte. That's when Bo made his move. He shoved the screaming thug out the back door and sprinted around the side of the cottage, using the deep shadows and the driving rain as cover. He was a rancher. He knew this land. He knew how to move unseen. He circled around behind the posse. They were all focused on the front of the cottage, their backs to him. Charlotte was sobbing, her small body trembling. He saw his target. The enforcer was distracted, arguing with the sheriff. Bo took a deep breath, raised the heavy pistol, and fired. He wasn't aiming to kill. He was aiming for the horse. The shot rang out, and the enforcer's mount screamed and reared, throwing its rider into the mud. In the chaos, Bo lunged forward. He scooped Charlotte up in his arms, cutting her bonds with the knife from his belt. "Run to the church," he yelled, pushing her toward the distant light. "Now, Charlotte." The posse was in disarray. Guns were drawn, but no one knew who to shoot at. The enforcer was struggling to his feet, bellowing with rage. Bo didn't wait. He charged the enforcer, tackling him low and hard, driving him back into the mud. They rolled and fought, fists flying. But Bo wasn't fighting for money or power. He was fighting with the fury of a father whose child had been threatened. From the cottage, the front door burst open. Hannah ran out, Not with a skillet this time, but with Bo's hunting rifle, which he'd left by the door. She leveled it at the posse. "Drop your weapons!" she screamed, her voice ringing with authority. "The man you're with is a murderer and a kidnapper." Sheriff Miller, finally seeing the truth, drew his own pistol and aimed it at the enforcer, who was now pinned beneath Bo. "It's over," the sheriff declared. Just then, the thug Bo had left unconscious in the mud by the back door stirred. He staggered to his feet, a look of murderous rage on his face. He saw Hannah, her back to him, her attention focused on the scene in front. He pulled a long knife from his boot and charged. "Hannah, look out!" Bo yelled. She spun around, but it was too late. The man was almost on her. A single shot echoed through the night. Not from the rifle, not from the sheriff. The thug stopped in his tracks, a look of surprise on his face. He swayed for a moment, then collapsed, a dark hole in his chest. Standing on the church steps, holding a still-smoking pistol, was Mr. Henderson, the quiet telegraph operator. He'd heard the shots and come running. He wasn't a man of many words, but his actions had spoken loud and clear. The fight was over. The rain began to soften, the storm passing as quickly as it had arrived. In the aftermath, the truth came out. The captured thugs confessed everything. They worked for Arthur Vance. Peterson, the store owner, had been his informant. Sheriff Miller, ashamed of his own gullibility, placed the enforcer and Peterson in irons. He sent a telegraph to the territorial marshal in Laramie, detailing Vance's crimes, from smuggling to attempted murder and kidnapping. The web of power Vance had woven from Boston to Wyoming began to unravel. Justice was coming for him and for Josephine. Bo held Charlotte tight, his daughter safe in his arms. He looked over at Hannah, who was standing with the rifle, her face smudged with dirt, her dress torn, looking more beautiful and brave than any woman he had ever known. Their eyes met over the chaos, and in that moment, a new understanding passed between them. They had survived the storm together. The weeks that followed were a time of healing for Silverdale, and for the three of them. The story of the siege at the schoolteacher's cottage became a local legend. Hannah's name was cleared, and the town council, deeply impressed, formally offered her the teaching position she'd only been pretending to hold. She accepted without hesitation. Charlotte returned to her lessons, no longer just a student, but a part of the legend herself. The bond between her and Hannah, forged in shared terror and courage, was now unbreakable. Bo found himself riding to town more often than was strictly necessary. He and Hannah would walk by the same creek where Charlotte had almost died, and they would talk. They talked about the future, about building something new from the ashes of their pasts. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the aspens turned to gold, Bo stopped by the creek and took her hand. "I'm not a man for fancy words, Hannah," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "But what we went through, it showed me what's important. It's not about surviving. It's about who you survive with." He pulled a small, worn box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold ring, set with a single pearl. It had been his grandmother's. "I thought all the love I had in me died with Mary," he said, his voice cracking. "You showed me I was wrong. You fought for my daughter. You fought beside me. Hannah Fairchild, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes, Bo," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." Their wedding was a town-wide celebration, a testament to the family that had been forged in fire. As Bo stood at the altar, with Charlotte holding Hannah's hand on one side and his on the other, he knew he wasn't just gaining a wife. They were building a fortress, a home, a future. They had faced the darkest storm and come out the other side, not broken, but stronger. They had found in each other a love that was more than just a quiet comfort. It was a fierce, protective, and unshakable bond. Welcome home, he thought, not just to the woman beside him, but to the feeling of hope he thought he had lost forever. If you enjoyed this story of survival and second chances, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of the unexpected.